Hi, I am Adeline Anderson, and today I will be presenting on the radical French feminist Olympe de Gouges. She lived during the radical French Revolution, and that is part of the reason her work is so well known still to this day. So, who she was, Olympe de Gouges is known for many things, both now and during the time in which she was living. She is accredited with being the first French feminist and one of the first feminists just in general in the world. Her beliefs were very humanistic in nature, which means she basically advocated for individuality and the idea that each person has agency over themselves. This went hand in hand with her more pacifistic beliefs, and you can see these being fought in many objectives throughout her life. However, her day-to-day life was that of a sex worker. She also had a passion for writing, and this was the main way that she spread her voice, and it was paid and funded by her rich customers from her sex worker life. This is a rough overview of Olympe de Gouges' life, beginning with her birth and complicated family life, ending with her unfortunate and, for lack of a better word, somewhat ironic death. We will discuss such items such as why she moved to Paris, since she's not originally from there, go in more in depth about her political beliefs, look at some of her accomplished works and their relevance to her political beliefs, and finally her unfortunate death and the lasting effects she had on the world and other activists since her time. We will also touch on the radical French Revolution, as most of de Gouges' work is relevant because of it. While I strongly believe she would have had these beliefs independently, whether there was a revolution occurring at the time or not, she became a martyr sort of because of the revolution, in a sense. She was born with the name Marie Gouges. Her last name was her stepfather's. Her parents were Anne Olympe Musset and Jacques Lefranc de Cax. He was a very notable judge in the French city Montauban, which is where she was born and lived before she moved to Paris. And he was an author and a member of the academic franchise. Her mother's husband was Pierre Gouges, and he essentially helped raise her, but his name does not appear as her true birth father on any sort of documents or forms. Her name now that she is known for and went by was a variation of her stepfather's surname and her mother's first name. She married a man named Louis Aubry in 1765 and had a son 2 years later with him. A year after this, Aubry died, and this is when she changed her name and moved to Paris in 1770. After moving, she never chose to take another husband and instead became a sex worker to make money. Many of her customers were of a very high class, very wealthy, and part of the aristocracy, which allowed her to learn this thing called the literary language of Paris. This is essentially the way things were written at the time to sort of be easier to understand. People understood if you wrote this way, and it was a more popular way of writing. Her wealthy customers and lovers also provided for her financially and paid for a lot of her works to be published. De Gouges' work and beliefs became increasingly more popular around 1788, which is a year before the revolution officially began. She vocalized for many different causes, but most were centralized around women and their unfair treatment in the French society. While a portion of her beliefs are listed here on the screen, she had many others, and they got very specific as well. So this is just a quick overview of the French Revolution since it is relevant to her life and the time that she was living. So essentially what it was the overthrow of the monarchy at the time. It began in 1789 with the storming of the prison Bastille. after the general public in France sort of had grown tired of the treatment and neglect from the government, the monarchy. They were living in filth and poverty, taxes were constantly being raised, laws were not made in their favor, the feudal system was still a thing shortly before, and the public was just tired of it. And so they stormed this prison and rioted. After more riots began, Louis XV tried to flee with his family but failed. And because of this, he was forced into signing a document or an agreement to create a new sort of government. A new legislative assembly that was to rule alongside the king with him. This was the first National Assembly, and he was later replaced by the National Convention in late 1792, and Louis XV was executed in 1793. After his death, the revolution getting even more violent and radical, and it was sort of a stronger rise for the middle class and a greater feeling of nationalism in France overall. So, to start off her notable works, we need to talk about the Declaration of Rights of Men and the Citizen. It was published in the response to feudalism, the feudal system in France, being abolished by the National Assembly. It claimed that all men were created equal and followed the themes of the monarchy sort of having too much power in their society. Olympe created her own in response, titled The Declaration of Rights of Women and the Female Citizen in 1791. And within this, she agreed that all men are created equal, but she extended these beliefs, rights, and freedom to women as well. And these plays that I have listed on the screen are just not even half or a quarter of the things she has written during her lifetime. She's written so many things. But these are very notable because they were very, very focused on her political beliefs and current events at the time. Most of her writings were. These were just the more notable ones. This is a quote that she is very famous for, most famous for. It is pulled from the Declaration of Rights of Women and the Female Citizen. A woman has the right to mount the scaffold. She must possess equally the right to mount the speaker's platform. So not only does this focus on the right for women to be able to protest just like men do, it also brings to light how women are generally ignored and not taken seriously when they speak on topics of politics, current events, and other things of the sort that men or could be seen as manly topics. And this is really important to her because this is the same criticism she was facing in day-to-day life because of her works. As time went on, the revolution was getting even more dominant, and she was eventually arrested for her beliefs, even though a lot of them aligned with the government at the time. She was arrested on July 20th, 1973, because of a very specific pamphlet she had published. It was titled The Three Urns, and in it she proposed a new system of government, which combined a republican government, a federal government, and a monarchy. They would all work together to rule over France. However, there was a law stating at the time that if anyone was in support of reinstating the monarchy in any way, shape, or form, they would be put to death. So even though she was pretty much on the same side as most of the French government at the time, because of this once very minor pamphlet she wrote, she was put to death. She was executed, despite fighting against the death penalty her entire life. So she was executed November 3rd, 1793, a year before the revolution officially ended. So these names on the screen that I have are just three examples of many, many famous activists since her time. Gandhi, Thoreau, and MLK were all very famous activists, just sort of philosopher thinking, that sort of that sort of thing. Gouges did not directly influence them or get mentioned by name by these famous speakers, um, but their work was greatly foreshadowed by hers. Um, she sort of paved the way, you could say, for sort of activism. Most of their fights for freedom and rights have significant overlap with ideas presented by her works throughout her life. That is all I have today. My slide, as you can see at the bottom left corner, I got a template from Slide Mania, but all of the writing is mine. These are my sources on the screen. All of the images are in the public domain. And I just want to thank you for taking the time to listen to me speak about Olympe de Gouges. I found this very fascinating to work on and research, and I'm really glad I chose this topic. Thank you so much again for listening, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.